All right. Well, good afternoon and welcome everybody. I'm so glad that you could be with us today for our Aging and Wellness breakout session. My name is Diana Bishop and I will be the lead presenter for today, but I'm so grateful to be joined by three other colleagues who are subject matter experts in the field of aging and wellness. And I'm going to have them introduce themselves in just a moment. And then we have a really rich conversation to share with all of you today. Definitely not enough time to get into the conversation as much as I would like, but it is a wonderful start. And my greatest hope is that at the end of today's session that we will continue on. I'm going to offer an opportunity for us to create a community conversation that will go on after today. So again, thank you and welcome everybody for being here today. So a little bit about myself. I work for Kaiser Permanente. I've had the great good fortune to work for them for 25 years. I'm a drama therapist by background, but now I am working in employee wellness and have received my certification as a certified health and wellness coach by actually Dr. Michael Arlasky. So I now work in the field. I do go on site to employer groups and help provide policy and programming for different employer groups, public and private, and really wanted to explore this conversation a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and have Dr. Arlasky introduce himself next.
Yeah, thanks, Diana, and welcome everyone. I am Dr. Michael Arlasky, and I'm CEO and founder of Real Balance Global Wellness Services. I'm a psychologist I suppose if I added it all up, over 25 years of clinical experience. But I got in on coaching very early. I got in on the whole field of wellness very, very early. And it's been my pleasure to help really develop that field. I was one of the founders of the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaching. And I think I also qualified to be on the panel just by the fact that I've got a lot of gray hair and beard and such, and been around for a while.
Thank you, Dr. Arlasky. So glad to have you with us. And next is Alice.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Alice Vestergaard. I'm a doctorate prepared health educationer specialist, and my expertise area is actually in educational physiology, learning in the aging brain, with emphasis on Alzheimer's disease and dementia prevention. I'm a university educator and also the founder of the field of sapientology, which is learning over the age of 55, and my company is Brain Gain. And I will next have Sharon, our last presenter, introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you, Alice, and my name is Sharon Mosley. I am a licensed mental health therapist and have been working in the field for over 20 years now, working with children and adults who present with a variety of concerns. And right now, I specialize working with adults who currently are being seen for anxiety and depression. And I have a private practice, the Fit Talk, where I work with adults and teenagers, and we also encourage them whenever possible to move. And so we often take our sessions outdoors.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sharon. And thank you, my dear friends, for being with us. What a great opportunity for us all to be together for rich conversation. So we wanted to open up our conversation. We're going to do what's called a warm-up chat. I'm going to have Michael go ahead and type that in. And the question is, what do you believe are the key concerns related to aging employees in the workforce? So again, what do you believe are the key concerns related to aging employees in the workforce? And I'm going to have Alice and Sharon sort of start out the conversation with either reflections that they've seen working with folks or their own experiences. Ladies?
Okay, well, I'll start. I think one of the biggest concerns I've encountered is that our aging workers are in what we call the sandwich generation. So they're caring for their own parents as well as their kids and grandkids. And this creates a lot of stress, both economically, mentally, and spiritually. So, and then you add on to that the fact that they're spending a lot of their time in a work environment that creates other stressors. So that's one facet that I'm encountering quite a bit. Sharon, do you want to comment?
Yes, one of the things that I've have noticed is that when we think about the workplace currently and technology, is the trying to make the adjustment to just an ever-changing technology in the workplace. And the concern is that, you know, as we are maybe presented with one set of technology that we are getting adjusted to, then it changes, and sometimes it changes without much warning. And so having to constantly adjust to that can be a bit stressful.
You guys bring some important points up there, and it looks like people are warming up to that chat feature. Is that right, Michael? Are we having anybody respond yet?
We finally got one. I really encourage people to go ahead and chat in your responses to that question.
You might just want to review how you find the chat, because some folks may not be familiar with this platform. So if you go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see some dots. And if you click on those dots, then the chat, you'll see the word chat and click there. And then you just send to everyone and you just type in your response.
Thank you, Alice. Yep. It does. We did get somebody, saying now they're coming in. That's great. So as people are commenting, I will share that this whole conversation started out of my own anxiety about aging. Last year, I noticed I was having some real negative feelings about the fact that I was not really reflecting as much the people that I was serving anymore. And I was getting some weird responses from people that I hadn't anticipated. When I'd walk in the room, things were shifting, I could tell. And then my own personal biases, if you will, my own looking in the mirror and really going, oh my gosh, I'm getting so much older, and will people still want me? I don't look vibrant anymore. I mean, there was a lot of negative stuff going through my head that was causing me to feel really less than. So I wanted to explore that because I felt like if I'm feeling this way, there must be many other people feeling the same way, but I wasn't seeing that. We weren't talking about it. So that's why I actually got this going on. So Michael, what are you noticing in the chat?
Yeah, well, one of the first ones is the thing that we often think about, and that's the concerns about when to retire and whether people will be financially able to manage once they do. That was one of the very first things that came in.
Absolutely. I know that comes across my mind. I'm sure, does it come across your mind as well, right? And in coaching sessions, that comes up quite a bit. So thank you guys for putting into the chat. Keep getting warmed up to that chat feature, and our team will read them out. I'm going to go ahead and move into our presentation. I'm going to share my screen here, and we'll get into some of the nitty-gritty pieces here. So let me get into full screen and hide my floating. There we go. All right. So let's see here. We really wanted to look at the numbers. Let's understand the discussion a little bit better by looking at some of the data. So what we do know is that 24% of American workforce is going to be turning over 55 this year alone. And then 10,000 baby boomers will turn 65 every day. So that is part of that silver tsunami. I don't know if any of you've heard that phrase before, but it certainly is this huge shift in demographics that I don't know we're really planning for at all, especially financially. I know it's a huge piece of concern for people. And then Alice brought this piece up in our planning call, and I wanted to really add this in, that 2.7 million grandparents are the primary caregivers for their own grandchildren. So Alice, do you want to say a little bit about that stat?
Well, this has been a development that has been occurring over the last 25 years, and it continues just like the COVID curve to go up in frequency. It was, 50 years ago, it was kind of unheard of, except in very specialized circumstances, that people in the workforce would be the primary caregivers of their grandkids. But we live in different times, and there's multiple variables that are contributing to this. But it is a trend that is expected to increase, particularly over the next 10 years. So it is something that every organization needs to pay attention to, and think about how you're addressing the needs of, again, the sandwich generation.
Absolutely.
I'll turn it back to you, Diana. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so 70, I mean, that it keeps inching up, the age for retirement from by being able to utilize your Social Security benefit to max out that benefit, if you will. And if you really, when you think about 70, what comes across in my mind is that, will I be well enough to keep up at work? Will I be able to get to that 70 and not be in poverty when I retire? As everybody knows, the cost of healthcare as we age is so much higher. And so if we're being pushed to keep working later, I know that there's anxiety about the ability to be able to stay well in that position, and the fear of becoming disabled. So I'm not sure, Sharon, was there something about this piece that you wanted to talk about in terms of the financial healthcare piece? You're on mute, dear.
Kind of going back to your point, Diana, is that, people at 70, I mean, a lot of folks are still in the workplace, and so we're living longer and working longer. And I think some of that is because folks just simply want to do that. But I think some of that is also driven by the fact that there's a concern that if they stop and they have a chronic illness, then how would they be able to manage that financially? Absolutely. And so some of that is just out of, maybe a little bit of anxiety around that.
Absolutely. So these are just some of the pieces of data just to get us thinking about this. I want to move into really what we're talking about in terms of what motivates older adults, because this is where I see a lot of gap in traditional wellness planning, is that a lot of employee wellness programs are really not geared to the whole population. It's really just trying to target chronic disease management. And as we do know, that older adults have a different wisdom about their own experience and what matters most to them. And I wanted to know if Dr. Orlowski, if you'd like to talk a little bit about this and give us a framework around it.
Yeah, well, when it comes to motivation to be well, I think something we have to remember is everybody really wants to be healthy and well. We sometimes encounter patients, clients who don't appear that way, who maybe have kind of given up on their ability to cope or manage their situation. And what we're really looking at there is not a lack of motivation as much as it is internal and external barriers that are in place that get in the way, that destroy the person's confidence, their self-efficacy, that number one, doing all this healthy living and wellness stuff will make any difference. And number two, that I in particular can be successful at doing it. We're often encountering a lot of people by this time in their life, if they're still struggling with this, where they've had a lot of failure experiences. They've tried and failed at smoking cessation, weight loss, stress management, so forth and so on. And so I think something we've got to remember is there's a difference between kind of what we're seeing and what really is there as motivation. You can have someone who's not making much progress, but it doesn't mean they're not motivated to be well. take a look at what the motivators are. And that's where you get into a good conversation with someone and you start to discover, well, yeah, I don't want to come down with the kind of chronic illnesses that I've seen in my family. I don't want to become a burden to my children and other people in my family to take care of me. And sometimes there's even intrinsic motivation. And that's really powerful. The kind of motivation where, yeah, I want to be able to continue, to play tennis, to continue to go hiking, to continue to go out dancing, to continue to get down on the floor and play with my grandchildren and get right back up again. So one of the things that I think we have to look at is how can we both understand what's unique for that person and help them get in touch with it, rather than think that a wellness program or an incentive program or a motivational speaker can motivate anybody to be well.
Absolutely. Alice and Sharon, is there anything that you want to add about that?
Well, I would just like to add that typically adults, especially those over age 55, are very centered on problem solving. And so that's a big motivation for them. And rather than just kind of as younger ages want to experience things, the older adult, the older active adult, or wherever they are on the continuum, is focused on solving problems or subject-centered activities, like they have a need to do X, Y, Z. And we know from our research that besides the fear of death, the second biggest fear that everybody over the age of 55 has is the fear of developing Alzheimer's disease and losing their lack of self. So this is a big motivator, and you can tie in exercise and diet and living with a purpose to that motivation. I'll turn it over to Sharon for the mental health perspectives.
I agree completely with what you just said. I'm sorry. I think that, again, when we start thinking about what motivates us as we age throughout the life cycle, is that there's a different set of stressors that come with each decade. And I think that as folks start edging closer to retirement and getting out of the workforce, the thought for many is that, well, they may be empty nesters and they may be living alone or without a spouse. And so for many of them, work has defined them. And so without that, then the question becomes, so what do I do now with that time? And there's a huge void there. And I think that that in and of itself can bring on some angst.
Absolutely. Oh, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I really appreciate Sharon and Alice bringing up the subject of meaning and purpose. That is absolutely huge. And if you take a look at the work of Vic Strecker, Strecher, University of Michigan, he's found correlations between meaning and purpose and all kinds of health outcomes. But it's especially important when that person is right on the borderline around retirement. Work can become less meaningful as they approach retirement, especially if they're in a job where it's not as fulfilling as maybe it used to be. And then once upon retirement, it's really a danger to lose what meaning and purpose they have built a lot of their life around. And we often see a sudden spike in all kinds of health related problems because of that. So helping people to be in touch with and develop a more holistic view of their life and find meaning and purpose in other aspects of their life, I think is really critical here.
Absolutely. And I think that there needs to be some ownership also with employer groups that are developing programming. There is, it's interesting, a fear of even having some of those conversations, which is, nobody likes to think about, younger folks aren't real thrilled to talk about aging because that's not where they're at. And they don't want to identify with those aging problems and so on.
Mhm.
And so it's a missed opportunity. And it also is alienating to people who are getting older. And so you'll see that the younger workforce will sort of have the limelight on them. And as an aging workforce, we're
Mhm.
sort of put in the shadow when we actually are full of wisdom and ability that is not being tapped into. And we lose that sense of purpose. To your point, Dr. Strucker's work is fantastic because he's able to get it on a cellular level that when we maintain our purpose, our telomeres are extended, which means our cellular health is better. So this is how important it is to keep that sense of purpose. Blue zones is a great research study as well regarding this whole conversation. So there's a richness here about motivation in older adults that I think, we're scratching the surface, but I do want to open the chat for our second chat here, Alice, if you'll help me with this.
All right. I do want to just say that there was a question submitted, a generalized question, and we'll have some time at the end where we'll come back to that question. I didn't want the person who submitted it to think that we were ignoring them. So we have a little rhythm to our presentation. We'll come back. We'll have a few minutes at the end, but these are the questions that we would like to focus on for this component of the presentation.
Yes, we will definitely get to them. So the next chat is, how do you connect with what motivates health behavior in older adults? What do you notice about your coworkers or family or friends regarding motivation and your own bias around what you think? So it's a loaded question, but sort of two pieces. It's how do you connect to what motivates older adults? And then do you notice your own bias or negativity about what you think about aging? So they're kind of two different pieces there, but I'd like to hear where all of you are in your thinking. So because I'm in presenter mode, I can't see the chats as they're coming in, and I take a little time with that. Want to ask my dear colleagues here, is there anything in terms of what you think of in terms of bias in the workplace with older adults?
Well, we definitely had one of our participants in the warm-up make a comment about ageism in the workplace. So we know that we're not the only ones that are thinking about that. I think, Michael, you were going to comment.
Yeah, when we think about all the wellness programming we've seen, and we want to create a website or a web page or a poster or something for maybe a project at work, who are the models? Who are the models? They're all high fashion models. They're all young, skinny, very, very attractive professional models. And most of us don't relate to them at all. And especially anybody over 50, right?
That's right.
So one of the things we know from the work of Albert Bandura and self-efficacy is that we're a lot more likely to feel greater self-efficacy when we see people around us that we can identify with being successful at lifestyle improvement. We don't get inspired by a 20-year-old, who's a superstar athlete. We get inspired by somebody that looks like us, appears like us, kind of lives like us, who is also successful at accomplishing some of this change.
Absolutely. And that goes back to Trabian Shorter's keynote this morning. It's that asset framing. If we are accurately reflecting the cultures and the communities that we serve in a way that help bring people on up, and versus making people feel ashamed and disenfranchised and so on. So you bring up a wonderful point there that, a lot of the stuff that we're doing just does not reflect or is culturally competent for what we're trying to do here, right?
Well, particularly when we're now really emphasizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, it's important that any organization really take a very focused review and look at who's represented in their company website, in the company brochure, in all the messaging, even social media. And is it truly representative of the real employee base that exists at the organization, and what changes need to be made?
Sure.
Right. There was
Are we
there
getting
was a
to the
chat.
Yeah.
Sharon, do you want to share, though it was just submitted,
Okay.
about physical activity?
So in the chat, someone mentioned that physical activity in a group setting can connect older adults, and the Feeling Fit program in SD is an example of that. I think that that is definitely what I get from that is community. That's the word that comes to mind. And so when I think about what connects, what I think about what I've observed around coworkers and family members and just people that I know, I think is having a sense of community, and exercise programs is one of the ways to get that. It gives you an opportunity to connect with folks, kind of going back to what you said, Alice, who look like you, who you have some share some similar interests with. And so I think that that's an excellent way to do that. I think as long as you feel that you're connected and you're staying engaged, your motivation is much higher.
Absolutely. And it's so funny that you would, this would come in because my next slide is community. Yay. So before I kind of move into our last segment for our conversation today, is there anything else in the chat that we should address before we move into the last segment here?
Well, maybe just one last point on motivation. I know when we were preparing for this, I mentioned the whole idea of thinking about motivation as fuel. And thinking about, okay, we provide the fuel, but we have to have a vehicle to put it in.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe community is part of that, maybe a how to, make these changes, a process. That's where, like in coaching, we have a whole methodology of behavioral change. That's the vehicle to help the person succeed. And so part of what we're talking about is the motivation, but we can't blame everything on the presence of or the lack of motivation. But we have to look at the type of motivation, and we also have to think of it as, okay, that's the fuel the person needs. Let's provide them with a way to use it.
Absolutely. So, which has us really thinking about what's meaningful wellness engagement in our workforce, in our aging workforce, and looking at the strengths. Stop focusing in on what people are doing wrong, or that they're going to cost your company more because they're getting older and they're on too many prescriptions and so on. We want to help. Coach Arlosky always says we want to build on strengths, and understanding what it is that's meaningful to the folks. So let's have conversations directly with those people instead of sitting around a conference table thinking that we know what people need. Let's bring better representation into those meetings, because what I do see as well in wellness committee meetings, there's poor representation. It's usually just HR that's at the table. And so it gives a very, I think, skewed point of view, because their investment is very different than the rest of the workforce. So we really want to have better representation in those conversations, and without assumptions, whenever possible, to have opportunities for people to gather in ways that aren't just these wellness challenges. Do we always have to have a wellness challenge or an incentive to, get people to go? Why can't we build community in different ways? And I think this is where the silver linings of the pandemic are coming into play, because it's allowing people to have different conversations that are more acceptable now, if you will, in mental health. And I think that is let's take this opportunity right now, because people are vulnerable in maybe a good way, and we're being able to use our technology differently. Can it bring us together in new ways that support and reflect the needs of everybody that we serve? So what are your thoughts on what community could be a better reflection of? Any thoughts on that?
Well, we've had quite a lot of contribution in the chat. People are warming up to it now and getting the hang of it. And there has been some comments about the pivot to online and how that is connected to access for people. How do you build community when there's unequal access? Some people are not as tech savvy, some people are. And how do you do that across all different sectors? And I don't think any of us have all the answers, which is why it's so important to dialogue in our community as we are right now online, to share with each other. And so you are, as participants, an essential ingredient in this recipe to create the fuel for Dr. Orlowski's car analogy. And together we are just beginning to delve into this dialogue. And nobody's going to have all the answers overnight, which is why we need to be asking and talking about these questions.
Absolutely. I'm wondering, to that point about unequal access to technology. I'm wondering if we'll be able to get some mentoring in so that we can actually help bring people into technology in a way that they're more comfortable with. I don't know in terms of access issues per se. I think there's going to be a lot of grant writing that happens within this next year to try to do that. I know school districts are feverishly doing that so that children will have their access at home. But I'm wondering if there's ways that we are able to mentor one another to help in that way, because there are a lot of people who are not comfortable. To your point, Alice, it's interesting. Before we started our conversation today, was talking about how she loves to read Wired magazine, and that what was the statement you said, Alice, beforehand?
I don't do tech, but I read about it.
Right.
I enjoy reading about it, so I'll have the language and be able to describe it and get a seat at the table when people are talking about it. I just can't do it. So this really connects with what a lot of you are writing about in the chat about technology. And I just wanted to bring up, somebody else had commented about intergenerational programming. There was an article I saw recently about a programming called, it was called Teen Years, and it was pairing tech savvy teenagers with seniors. And there are some very progressive workplaces that have these kinds of pairings without the stigma of ageism. And it makes for a very diverse and robust work environment where people feel comfortable and safe. And instead of feeling like, oh, I'm aging out of the system and I can't keep up, they tap into the resources of younger generations who grow up with baby's first computer in their cribs.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, I think that we have to look at, everybody has a cell phone, and we can help people if they, we can use this in a different way. Not everybody may have the laptop going on, but maybe there are ways to use our cell phones a little bit more effectively in that way. I know that we're doing that with multicultural groups, trying to help, because they don't have laptops, so they don't respond to certain things that we do, but they do texting has been a way of creating a community as well. So I think we just need to think outside of the box and have some fun with it as well. I mean, we're at a point where, let's try as many different types of things as possible, because we don't know what will stick, right?
Well, something that we've been talking a lot about in the coaching world for a long time is what I call coaching for connectedness.
Mhm.
And what we really realized was, how long do you see a coach in your lifetime? It's about like that. But to make behavior change last, they're really community support is one of the biggest factors. There was a huge consortium that took on the task of looking at what makes health behavior change last. And they said, first of all, we know very little about that. But number two, what we do know is it's a shift in self-concept, who you think you are, and it's community support. That's what makes it last. So someone who begins to be more active, how can we support them in continuing to do that? What kind of community opportunities can there be? And, we're talking about the tech and the online, but I think what we have to also remember is what opportunity there is in outdoor activity. I think a lot of people are starting to see here in the pandemic that nature is sort of being rediscovered as the new opportunity for wellness. And why not at a workplace, instead of thinking everything has to happen in an indoor facility, where, as we know, the spread of COVID virus is a lot more dangerous. It's 18 times safer outdoors.
Mhm.
That's where we can have walking groups that walk outdoors instead of around a track inside. That's where we can have interest groups that are more outdoors oriented, get people moving in that way, or get them involved in community gardens where the nutritional aspect can be improved. There's a lot of different ideas that I think are still about physically bringing people together in a safe way in a place that where it can happen more easily. But community support is huge.
Absolutely. And I love the idea of the garden. Boy, wouldn't that be, we can be outside safely, as you said, and work together as a whole. And it actually gets us back. It goes back to that blue zones mentality, right?
Yeah.
That we commune with nature and we commune with one another, and no one's left out of that. So I love that. We're time is going so quickly today, and I want to be observant of time because I do need to let people go a little bit early so they can go to their next session. But I want to have us kind of consider as we're wrapping up. We've seen the statistics. We've talked about a little bit of ageism. We've kind of dabbled on a couple different areas about what aging as an employee might feel like, and what we're struggling with, what we're seeing, and how we're having some missed opportunities, and where we can build community, I think is key. And we're hearing that time and time again today about the importance of doing that, but thinking outside of the box on how to do it. And then, as Dr. Orlowski says, I just love this quote: motivation is the fuel, but we need a vehicle to drive it. And I think each community, each work site has its own unique culture. So that vehicle is going to maybe be a Tesla or a Honda or whatever, but it needs to be something that everybody gets to help build together. And I think that people are open-minded more so today than ever, which I'm grateful for. So I want to open it up now for questions. And also wanted to let you know, in the speaker section for today's session, I've got two different handouts that you can download. Here are the resources that we touched on today, but helping you go back to work or your communities and keep this moving, create that vehicle, like Michael said. It's so important that we not lose this momentum, and also just, unfortunately, aging population are the forgotten folks. They're, again, in the shadows, and we want to stop that from happening. So opening it up now to questions or comments. Are we seeing anything in the chat right now?
Well, there was one that was submitted earlier asking about comments in regards to older workers taking retirement now due to COVID-19, and if we had any comments about that.
I'm not sure. So, Michael, what are you thinking about that?
Well, that's certainly happening, especially with economic downturn, when people are being let go, and just losing jobs. We all know that when you're of more advanced age, it's going to be much harder to get another one. You're not just going to pick right up and get rehired somewhere with a very tight economy. So there's a realistic fear right there. And I think it's also going to be interesting to see how this shapes the workforce, because I think with the incentive for early retirement that a lot of companies are giving to kind of downsize the payroll, we may be losing a lot of knowledge base and a lot of young workers that may be, fantastic people and highly skilled. They may not know the job of that particular place and have a lot of catching up to do without much mentoring to help them.
Absolutely. And it's to your point, the economic impact is yet to be really seen yet. We won't know how this is all going to play out for another year or so. And that's anxiety producing for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't, sometimes it's day by day. How are we going to figure out how to move forward, right?
Yeah, and here's another thing that I'm not sure how this fits in, but some companies, if they are continuing to provide healthcare as people retire, move out of positions, they might want to consider how they're going to continue to keep those people well, to keep down their costs.
Absolutely.
And also, if folks do take retirement, what assistive services and transitional pieces are in place by an organization to help these people? So it's not all of a sudden one day they're an employee and then flick the switch. Because we know from our research that when there's that very, very sudden change without support as a foundation, people are at greater risk for developing chronic diseases, mental health issues, addictive disorders, and substance abuse, because it can be quite stressful to have a sudden retirement or even a not sudden retirement. It's and Sharon can speak to this because it's her area of expertise. From a mental health standpoint. Sharon, did you want to comment before we wrap up all the way?
No, I think you made a very great point. I completely agree. I think that is really, probably one of the driving factors in a lot of that is just thinking about, where does that leave them in terms of just their emotional health and well-being. But it's a lot to consider from both perspectives, from, not just the adults, but also employers as well. And so I don't think that, again, it's something that we'll be able to solve today, but I think that those are very valid points.
So goodness, I wish we could stay on longer, and I'm excited about this whole conversation. I'm so grateful for everybody coming in today. I've put my email. I'm the point person for our conversation today. Would love it if you would all feel free to email me. I will collect everyone's email contacts, and I'd be happy to create a Zoom meeting afterward to keep us going in this direction. I want to hear what all of you are doing in your communities. Have you been able to make some headway? What's working, what's not working? It's such an important conversation, and I don't want it to be lost just after today, because how conferences are, they're great, but then after you go, we have to go back to the real world, so to speak. So my team with me today, we really, really want to invite you to stay connected with all of us. We hope this time has been helpful to you. Hope we've got your brain popping here and thinking about a vehicle to move forward with. Any last statements from my dear friends with me?
Be kind to yourselves and be kind to others, especially during this trying time. And thank you for participating. Know that this is just the end of the beginning, because the conversations that we've had today are just seeds planted, and we have to come together and continue this discussion.
I think I might just add that, we sometimes frame getting older as this tragic thing that happens. And yet, when you interview people that have aged and aged well and still have meaning and purpose in their life, they're often referring to it as the best time in their life. If they've been able to maintain their health, especially, at least to some degree. And, with a shift in the way that you use your time, it's actually a great opportunity to find fulfillment in ways that you maybe didn't have the opportunity before. So frame it positively. Look forward to
Woohoo!
it.
Sharon, anything you'd like to say before we sign off?
No, but this has been great.
Thank you. Yes, it has been great. So I wish everybody a very happy holiday season. Again, thank you so much for taking time to be with us. I'm grateful for you all being here. You've excited me, and I want to thank my dear co-presenters for being with me. I couldn't do it without you and your rich conversation. So we wish you all well rest of your day, and we hope to stay connected. I'll be in touch with you if you email me. Thank you. Take care. Goodbye, everybody.
Right.